could say.
Sure. Thank you. And your current role, James, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. So my current role is Senior Technical Manager of the TIFF Lightbox, so is the headquarters for the Toronto International Film Festival. So year-round, we have 6 operational cinemas, well, 1 private cinema and 5 public cinemas where we screen a lot of varied formats, so 35, 70 mil, 16, and DCP in all 5. I'm sorry, and film and some, digital and others. We host a number of different high-profile events throughout the year. So there's a fair bit of live event infrastructure that's built into the venue. There's also a lot of broadcast infrastructure built in the venue. So we do a lot of multicam switch shows in addition to, screening a film and then maybe have a conversation with a director or a filmmaker or actor, part of the production, and then live streaming that or doing a production thereof. Outside of sort of the day-to-day operations year-round, during the festival in September, we add another cinema in the at 3 large venue, how to describe it, large performing houses that we convert, so 2,000 plus seat theaters that we convert into cinemas, plus we take over a 14-screen multiplex. So my role is in assistance with one of the other tech managers to handle a lot of the booth logistics. So it's, not only helping the technicians and sort of deploying how those venues get built, but also a lot of the booth infrastructure. So the networking components and sort of, how some of the distribution for the digital cinema packages get to those various locations and sort of create a bird's eye view of all of those screens at the same time, given that we have, almost 24 plus screens, 400 plus films over the course of 12 days. So the sheer volume of it and sort of the oversight is quite a task. So it's heavily involved in that component as well when the festival gets going. So yeah.
Wow, busy. It's
a busy time, yeah.
Sticking with you, James, can you tell us a bit about how you got into the cinema business and kind of what lessons have you learned along the way?
I think most cinema technicians or projectionists kind of fell into it, I would say, almost not all, but I definitely didn't take a very direct route. I actually studied English literature at the University of Toronto, but there was also a cinema studies degree, which was all theory and history. Luckily, they had a booth. I seemed to be sort of naturally had a natural inclination for technology and, building my own computer since I was very little. So it became one of those things where I needed a job. There was a job in the booth, and I kind of started looking at how the projectors are run with the projectionists that were there for the cinema at the university. And I was just kind of a pest until they eventually let me touch the machines, started getting familiar with them. And then one thing kind of led to another. There was a very small community of projectionists within Toronto at the time, particularly doing sort of art house cinema stuff. And from there, it kind of grew, and I was able to get other jobs at other venues. And once it's one of those things, once you end up doing a decent job, people kind of call you back again and again. So I was doing a lot of screenings, and then from there, that developed into getting a role at the Toronto Film Festival doing film and print inspection very early on. And so that's sort of the genesis of my time of getting into sort of the industry. And then eventually that grew into tech management because I was just very curious about how, and so, you spend a lot of hours in a dark room alone, you start getting, you get a little antsy or a little bored, and you start reading manuals and start figuring things out. And so one thing sort of led to another, that I sort of got into the role I am now by just being heavily involved in a lot of different film festivals, a lot of different screenings. It also helped that Toronto has just an unbelievable film culture around it. Just a lot of screening spaces, a lot of really dedicated cinephiles. So it was a nice environment to sort of foster that that swing, I guess. So as far as lessons, I mean, I definitely get very heavy into the tech side of things as the further I went along, consulting and sort of, building cinema projects and sort of system designs. But I think one of the things that was really helpful is just being sort of a film nerd and being a cinephile to start, because I think if you have a good understanding of film history, that really helps with understanding some of the technology and the decisions behind the technology and sort of how what can make a good presentation. I think in the end, I think that's pretty critical. So I think that was one of my biggest lessons. Yeah. So.
Okay. Now, I know, Dom, because I know you personally, but you've been in this industry, although you look young, you've been in for quite some time, haven't you? So how did you get into it, the cinema business?
Yeah, I've been a projectionist, man and boy, Phil, man and boy. I actually started when I was 15. I was working as a projectionist. I used to volunteer at a local cinema. Grew up in a small town in North Devon, southwest of England. And I used to tear tickets, and I did this to get free tickets to the cinema, basically. And I love film from a very early age. And then I also joined a theatre group at the same cinema, it was a cinema theatre art gallery kind of complex. And I pretty soon realised I wasn't that into acting anymore. I kind of started pestering the technician who worked there, who was also the projectionist. He did lighting and sound for us for our theatrical productions. He also showed films. And I started, I mean, as James says, and there's a lot of this in the kind of the cinema industry, it is pester power, really. And I pestered him to show me how to run a projector. This was about age 15. And then he was a quite tempestuous character, as projectionists often were in those days. And he had a big falling out with the cinema management and just kind of quit on the spot, essentially. And me and my friend Olaf, who was also getting trained up at the same time, were kind of thrown in at the deep end. And we were running films during one summer, I think that would have been 1990, just running films once a night, in the cinema. And it was a bit of a baptism of fire, really. And I turned 16 that June and started running films from that point. Running films that I shouldn't have been running. I was running 18 certificate films, and the whole thing was quite dodgy, really, and probably shouldn't have happened. But it was a great introduction to actually working in a cinema and just working stuff out as you go along, because there weren't really that many people to ask. And I wouldn't say all of my shows were smoothly projected, and yeah, there were definitely some odd cock-ups here and there, but it was a good introduction, a good grounding in it. And then I quit and went to university for 3 years, and didn't really actually touch a projector during that time, and moved to London and started just looking around for kind of part-time jobs. Was working in a cinema in Hampstead for a bit, saw that a job was advertised at the NFT, as it was back then. Applied for it. That was aged 23, I guess, and I've been there ever since. So I guess I found I liked it, and they liked me, and yeah, I've done various different jobs for the BFI since that period. I started in 1998, and I worked as a projectionist entirely as a projectionist until 2006. Then I spent some time working as an installations manager for the BFI. Had a artist film and video gallery for 5 years. I did that. Then I moved back into the cinema field again, 2011. Been there ever since, really. And it's just a really great, interesting venue. You know, it's just always very varied. I'm surprised I've been there as long as I have been, but I still enjoy going to work there every day. I love the team that I work with. I've got a large team of projectionists, which most cinemas don't have these days. All sorts of formats, you know, as James says, 16, 35 mil, 70 mil, nitrate. We're one of the few cinemas that still shows nitrate in the world. 1570 IMAX, and also all the digital systems as well. Lots of events, lots of on stage kind of events with different directors, filmmakers, and it's just a really fun, varied job. And yeah, that's why I've never left.
I guess, yeah. I mean, just sticking with you, Dom. You know, you've been in the industry a long time. You've lived through the transition of the original film to digital. I mean, how would you say have the skills needed in cinema changed significantly over the years? I guess, and the back of that question is what skills should emerging talent and techs be considering to make it in this business now?
Yeah, the skills have definitely changed, but I mean, in our particular instance, I guess the skills haven't changed in so much as they've just broadened and widened, and you need a lot more knowledge in a lot more different areas than you did when we first became a projectionist in the kind of late 90s, I guess. Back in those days, we run the London Film Festival at the BFI as well, and it was just endless makeup and projection of 35mm. So that was really kind of the key skill that you need to know. You needed to know how to maintain projectors, lace projectors, without making mistakes. There was still sort of on-stage stuff as well, a lot of kind of events back then, but that kind of pure working with equipment, with machines, and that kind of intimate knowledge of how they all work, how to get things on the screen without kind of causing any damage. That for us is still a part of my role, and it's I think it's a part of James's as well, because he still shows a lot of film. But gradually, kind of during the transition to digital cinema, which kind of kicked off for me, I guess, in about 2004, really. We had the, I don't know if you remember this, Phil, there was the digital test bed.
Yes, I do remember that, yeah.
It was kind of a government scheme that was set up in conjunction with the BFI, where it was designed to sort of highlight new digital technologies and how different companies were working with different systems, and there was a screen built to check out all these new emerging technologies. And so that was my first introduction to it. It was at 2004, and then it was just a gradual process of more and more equipment arriving, more and more kind of skills required, and some people could work with it, and some people enjoyed it, and I actually just genuinely enjoyed finding out how new equipment worked, how we could patch into the system, how we could kind of augment the projection boxes we were using, just extending it and expanding on it. And I think that's why I've stuck around, really. I kind of, the whole transition wasn't kind of problematic to me. It was just widened my interest and widened the kind of experience you needed to actually still operate in that field. And I think that's the case now. You need to still be able to show a film, because, like I say, we still show quite a lot of film at the BFI, but also there's different. I mean, James alluded to this as well. You need to know about networking, about kind of IP, how equipment communicates with each other. You need to know about calibration of projectors, calibration of sound systems. Just the world of projection has just expanded, and it's, I guess, the BFI and to the same extent TIFF are different from most cinemas in that a lot of cinemas just have completely abandoned their analog film projection.
Yeah.
So the main focus currently would be on kind of understanding how digital cinema works, what DCPs are, how servers work, that side of things as well.
Yeah, I think, and sorry, Dom, and I guess, James, I guess you're, as you said, when you were young, you were building computers. I guess, these days it's you need to be a lot more IT savvy in this industry.
Yeah, it's been an interesting sort of full circle in a way for me, because I grew up in a small town and I got, just very focused on computers, building them myself, figuring out how they worked. And then when I got into projection, it was still predominantly, at the time, it was early 2000s, so it would still be 35mm as the dominant standard. And I was doing print assemblies at TIFF, so we'd be going through hundreds and hundreds of reels and doing these assemblies and disassemblies, and that was like my job for a while. So very familiar and adept with sort of how that standard worked, and how that, how presentations were supposed to be put on for film. And then you saw this, digital onset. Digital was going to come and it was going to take over. And so it was having that sort of base, I mean, loosely kind of IT knowledge was very helpful to get back, because when things started arriving as server drives and networking infrastructure, it wasn't incredibly foreign to me. But I will say that the crash course that was required to really fully understand it, and to understand how reliable it can be, but also how precarious it can be, and knowing really intimately network infrastructure and how all the machines are going to talk and communicate with each other became really, really critical around that time. And it's still, I mean, now it's even more critical, obviously, but like at that transition, there was a lot of interesting things and hiccups and stuff that you just have had to try to figure out. And it's not a very linear mechanical problem solving method as you would do with like a 35 mil machine that might have a mechanical problem. So I found like that was a very interesting comparison, but we still do a lot of both. So it is Dominic said, yeah. So yeah, and particularly for the live event, I know we had one. It was a few years ago when I think we had Taylor Swift in to do like a conversation with our CEO at the time, and her film, she shot a short music video on 35. So we had a full live event production, but in the middle of it, we ran 35 mil reel of, her music video, and then kind of went back. So it was definitely the hybrid space of how we were doing an event like that. So yeah, it was pretty cool. So.
Challenging, I can imagine, challenging. Yeah. So I guess, so James, what would you say for a younger person looking to sort of get into what you guys are doing? Sort of what sort of opportunities are open within the sort of film festival circuit for a young person?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what Dominic was saying, sort of the pester power. I mean, it is still that, meaning like there isn't just a course you take at school or something that's going to be a very linear path to get to that, right? So, familiarize yourself with, well, again, be a cinephile, I think, to begin with, because I think that gives you a very good base to start with. But then get familiar with the technology. I mean, one of the nice things now is that as bland as it is, like going through manuals and sort of getting an understanding of online how a lot of the technology works does help. I think one thing to stress for people really seriously getting into this particular industry is getting very familiar with the standards, because one comparison I kind of make with the cinema industry as opposed to some of the live events is, cinema seems much more akin to book publishing, meaning like there's an expectation of how everyone's going to have the same sort of experience. So if you are very familiar with the standard that defines how a good cinema presentation is going to be put on, then that's going to make all the difference. So I'd say like getting very familiar with that trajectory, I think helps. And then getting yourself in a booth, I guess, for the tech end, that's the tricky thing. So, yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. I think you kind of have to just get your hand, you have to get in there and get your hands dirty and properly, learn from experience. I think, as you said, there's a lot of online courses. I mean, us at Christie, we have Christie University, which is lots of great online learning courses, but really it's the experience of actually, using projectors and networking.
And reading manuals. And I just think the boring thing of like, doing your homework really, because then that's ultimately going to give you the knowledge base to understand the systems and the paths as far as how signals are communicating and how things should be aligned. I just find I'm a very visual learner. So like when I started reading through all of those, I could able to visualize how everything should be put together. Right. And I think that if you are able to sort of tackle stuff earlier on, it really opens up. So
just I'd add to that. I think it's just what really helps is kind of a love of, without wanting to be too cheesy, kind of show business, really just actually loving the idea of putting on a show for people. That's a critical part of it, and also wanting to be around it. So like you were saying, James, there aren't really any formal routes to being a projectionist or a cinema technician in the UK. A lot of it's pester power, but a lot of that can come from that. A lot of that knowledge can come from, say, you join a film society at university or a college or something. Projectors are a lot cheaper than they used to be. Data projectors, you don't need to have kind of the full spec D cinema system installed just to put on a show. You can use a laptop, you can use a Blu-ray player or whatever you'd like to use for playback. All you need is a kind of a darkened room, a small projector, a sound system, and you've essentially got yourself a cinema there. So that kind of informal route into it could start with something like that, a film society at a school or a college. And then, if you want to be around cinema, then every town has a cinema. You can get a job there. One of the tried and tested routes to being a technician in UK at least is working as food and beverage or box office.
Yeah,
that's how you get over the doorstep in a way, and then you meet people. I mean, most cinemas these days, most multiplexes won't really have a technician on site. So perhaps you're better off trying that with an independent cinema who's more likely to have a technician kind of still actually active in the projection box. once you're kind of there, then it's just about meeting people, chatting people, showing your interest in what people do. And most people, I'm always happy to show people how it works, kind of to demystify it a little bit. And
yeah,
if people want to shadow me or shadow some of the team, I'm happy to do that from time to time. So it's kind of just being around it and being interested is possibly the best route in, really, because there are no formal routes in the UK. In France, you can get a projection qualification, which we probably should have had here. And a few years ago, you could, maybe the BKSTS would be able to do something like that, but that's less common now, and it was kind of harder to achieve that in the UK. But I think it's definitely quite tricky in terms of the number of jobs out there. I think with the shift to digital, there was a massive kind of loss of the projectionist roles across the UK. But it's not to say there aren't still roles out there. And I think, as you're alluding to as well, Phil, those roles have changed slightly, and maybe we're not lacing projectors and making up and breaking down prints anymore. But there's still kind of a lot of elements of putting on a show, and there's still the work out there. We had a role we're just recruiting for at the moment. So even though people don't tend to leave the BFI very often, myself included, there are still jobs available out there. So yeah.
Yeah, we still, over at TIFF, we still have a lot of, we have a lot of projectionists on staff. We have a lot of need for technicians, but with a broader skill set, I would say. So it's, just to kind of, as long as there's a curiosity there and there's sort of an understanding, particularly I would say at this point of, the digital projection and just networking and sort of like how different components speak to each other and how things are aligned in a digital capacity. I think there are positions, there are sort of opportunities there. I think there's a bit of a threshold when it comes to sort of the cinema service technician, as far as getting a sort of really deep in sort of the technical repair side of things. But it's, yeah, it's still, the idea is still to put together a good show, right? So, the idea is, so if you have a good technician behind, sort of in the behind the scenes in the booth, then that's going to make a huge difference. Whether everything is going to sound and look proper, right? So, I think
you're both absolutely right. It's all about, at the end of the day, whether it's 35, 70 mil film or if it's digital, it's really about the end result. It's about the overall presentation, the quality. And I, speak to a lot of people, and being in projection myself, it's 50% of the experience. A lot of some cinema chains that I've visited, a lot of it is just as much on the audio. If the audio is not right, then people will, the viewer will have a terrible experience.
Yeah.
So I guess, we're talking a lot about projection, but I guess, 50% of that is also audio, which is another completely different area of expertise. But just like Dom said, there's no formal course in the UK for how to be a cinema projectionist. I guess is that the same in Canada?
Yeah, I think there used to be a license, just slightly before time for projection, but it's that none of that exists now. So it's very much if you know somebody that knows somebody that then potentially can get you in the booth, or if you worked in a theater like Dom was saying, in box office or concession, then they have sort of a technology, then maybe they can come in the booth and figure things out, and then one thing sort of leads to another. So it's there's definitely not a simple path or a linear path, I guess, but there is a path. So,
I guess I'd say just to add to that, I'd say you touched on audio, and I think that's an interesting point. And I think it is if the audio is wrong, then it's much easier to get the audio wrong, actually. But that's actually, interestingly, a kind of a route in a way, because there are audio engineering courses, there's sound engineering courses, and that increasingly that kind of it's in the right kind of ballpark, I guess. Because when we recruit these days, obviously it's useful if you can project analog film, but we have no real expectation that we'll always find people out there who have that experience, because that experience has become rarer and rarer. I think there are about 50, 55 cinemas in the UK that can still project film on, celluloid, and many of those won't do it. There are a few in London still. So we're looking wider. If you've got kind of theatrical knowledge, if you've got kind of, I don't know, if you know how to do lights and mics, and maybe the kind of video side of it, then that's a more likely route in potentially than being able to project on film. So there's kind of the audio engineering element to it is possibly a good foundation for getting in there, as well as pester power. As well as
pester power. That is the buzzword of this this webinar for sure. With regards to the film festivals, like you've just literally wrapped up the London Film Festival.
Yeah.
Do you have many opportunities for freelancers? Do you need like volunteers or freelancers on these festivals? Or do you use just sort of in-house permanent staff?
For us, we do. I mean, we have very similar roles, myself and James, actually, and we kind of expand our operation during the London Film Festival, and we're actually kind of the hub for the film festival. So we manage the delivery of all the assets, all the content, all the verification QC, and delivery. We take on, I think there are 5 different venues that we work with, and we actually build our own venue in the Royal Festival Hall, which is a concert hall next to BFI South Banks. So how we run it at the BFI, and I guess this might be similar for you, James, we have kind of a core group of people who work on the festival, but then we expand it just for that particular period. So from, say, July through to end of October, we'll take on additional people. And one of the main areas that we kind of take on new roles in is in content management, really, because you're dealing with a level of content delivery that we just don't experience year round. I mean, you said 400 films. You show more than we do. We show about 250 generally in our 2-week festival. So that kind of role expands. Unfortunately for us, we're a government arm's length government body, as it's called in the UK. So we can't actually take on freelancers, but we do a lot of short fixed term contracts, and so we expand that usually. I mean, generally not a huge number of roles, but 4 to 6 roles, I guess, in the team we take on to manage the whole festival. And we kind of, and also there's an element, I suspect this is the same for you too, James, of everyone in the core team working really, really hard.
Yes. Yes, it definitely puts a strain on the core too. But we do the same thing. We have to bring a lot of people in, particularly with content management. I think is one of the heavier loads to manage, particularly with encrypted content, where we're getting decryption keys or KDMs for digital cinema content. And if you just kind of do the math of the number of screenings, the number of venues, the number of managing sort of those decryption keys and how they get to the venues, and to make sure that we have the right versions of all the films that are actually ingested at the venues. And so, like, my role is helping with some of that oversight, but we definitely bring people on in order to help manage that, just for the sheer volume of it. It's just so massive to kind of to take on, and that's and part of that role can be, it's interesting sort of what you need to sort of learn, right? And you end up opening up what a KDM or what these sort of like dense text files to look through them to basically, hunt for the lost piece of information that maybe tells you why this is or not working, and then relay that back and try to, manage all of those mini disasters before they turn into actual, in cinema disasters. So it's quite a heavy load to take, but same thing in Toronto, we definitely take a lot of people on to help manage that. So
I think one of the things we do a lot of at the London Film Festival is events. So filmmaker, director, actor events, and we do a good one we did this year was Denis Villeneuve, who did a kind of a career interview at the Royal Festival Hall. So we generally take on at least 2 people to work on that side of it. So what we're looking for from people who to recruit to that particular post is kind of video editing skills. So people, if you know how to use Premiere, if you've made your own videos, there's a lot of kind of clip cutting and QC work. So we cut a lot of clips, we convert a lot of files to DCP, digital cinema package, for people who don't know what that is. That's kind of,
I was just about to say thank you for that.
that's the standard for playback. It's just it's a slightly more complicated, bespoke video file, I guess you could say. It's got various assets, and a lot of it's about encryption, as you mentioned as well. So piracy being a massive concern for the studios. So we build a lot of DCPs. It's actually a very, very reliable and kind of a responsive way to work. And our shows have become a lot more. The quality of the presentation has improved rapidly since we were running. We used to run clips on 35mm, and it was always a little bit chaotic. But
yeah, I did that once too.
Yeah. So there's that element as well. So if you've got kind of video editing skills as well, so that's kind of a way in. And then I think that's, you know, once you've joined the team or you're part of a team, then you can understand a bit more of the wider team and how the wider team works and get experience that way.
Interesting. I guess, well, here's one for you. Bit off topic, but could you remember, both of you, the first film shown in digital format at your festivals?
Oh God.
I
knew this one was coming, Phil, and I had a bit of a think about it, and I got to be honest, I struggled. I really struggled. I was trying to look back at the opening night films of the festivals that I've worked on, and yeah, I couldn't really say.
So I did have to look this up. I found it though.
Found it. Well done.
I did found it. So, well, it was kind of two parts because early 2000s, I also did some work for a documentary film festival, and so a lot of certain film types were coming on HD Betacam tapes or sort of digital tapes. So we did digital projection in that form fairly early on. I would say like 2001, I think was the first time that we did that. But that required like a tape deck. And again, it was more like a broadcast infrastructure, right, as far as how that was projected. The first digital cinema one, as far as I'm aware, we had a festival that we managed alongside, well, that TIFF hosted or put on called Sprockets, or what's TIFF Kids. It was like a children's festival. And we had an animated film called Over the Hedge. And so Christy was actually helped out in providing the projection technology for us to do that. And I think that was the first time we had actual digital cinema in that capacity. So yeah.
I remember that movie. Yeah.
Kind of my way around to answering this was kind of to avoid the festival completely. And I just remember the first kind of D cinema files, DCPs that we started to see were kind of essentially restorations of things like Robin Hood, The Adventures of Robin Hood. So the old Technicolor Errol Flynn film, which was restored. I can't remember who by, but absolutely beautiful it looked, and Casablanca as well. So those early DCP restorations were kind of meticulously done and looked stunning. And I guess we were kind of using those. And I mentioned the digital testbed earlier. It was that kind of title that we were screening in kind of 2004, I guess, 2005, on kind of the earliest versions of digital cinema projectors. So that's when DCP and D-Cinema really started kind of those specific titles, but brand new films, I couldn't actually remember anything. So apologies for that, Phil.
No problem. I'm just talking about that. The original testbed. I remember visiting the NFT, and we had one of our very first digital cinema projectors, and I remember seeing a clip of Mission Impossible actually. Yeah. Side by side against the 35mm film print, and you could see the difference in contrast, in colors. There was a close-up of Tom Cruise when he's climbing up a mountain right at the beginning, and you could just see the detail and the advantages of digital cinema projection. I mean, that was 20 years ago. So yeah, it's interesting that how things have sort of moved on over the years.
Yeah,
I would say, is there any sort of for our sort of younger guests on viewing this, what would you say? Have you got any sort of takeaway advice for people who are in the industry? Any just key takeaways from your own experiences? What you would advise a younger person who wants to get into this industry?
I mean, I think, as I mentioned before, because just having an interest in putting on a bit of a show, and it is easy enough to do that, and kind of being around that kind of venue, and just showing an interest, really. I think that's definitely the way forward. And And actually putting on your own events is a great way to understand how things can go wrong as well, and how you have to remain calm in the face of an audience. And there's lots of kind of, putting yourself in under that sort of level of pressure is kind of useful to see whether you enjoy it.
Just
it can be quite stressful at times, definitely.
Yeah, definitely echoing that. Just remaining calm under pressure, I think, is key. Just to visualize sort of what the problem is and how to figure it out, how to troubleshoot it, rather than sort of have a moment of panic. I would say that would, definitely be key. But also just curiosity. I always say, like, put yourself in the position of at the screening that you're about to tech manage, or you're about to sort of like facilitate, and just try to think of all the parameters involved and what is going to put the best presentation forward, right? And so if you're going to notice something out of the corner of your eye that's kind of distracting you, how do you take care of that? How do you make sure it's it's faithful to the director's vision as possible, and everyone has a great experience? So I'd say that's sort of like the critical thing right now.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's really having a passion for the industry, and being a cinephile, as we say, is a big thing. I guess, as Dom said, and yourself, James, it's really about networking. It's about getting in with the right people. I mean, from my experience in the last 25 years, although the cinema industry is massive globally, as an industry, it's actually very small. And I'm sure you'll both agree with me.
Yes.
Once you kind of get into this industry, it's very, very hard to leave it, to be honest. I think we're all proof of that here, the amount of years we've got between us in this industry. So just going to see whether we've got any questions coming in from the...
One final point, and it kind of, I mean, I'm speaking of myself here as well, but it does help to be a bit of a nerd, quite frankly. It helps if you like tinkering with stuff, understanding how things work. And I still find it amazing that I'm able to kind of earn a living playing with projectors, quite frankly. I'm in the process of trying to get some sprockets built by a precision engineering company at the moment for old Philips DP70s, which are 60-year-old projectors that we've got installed in NFT1, one of our biggest cinema. And it's just kind of fun, really. And just you get to meet some fairly wacky people like this. I'm working with these engineers who live out in Bracknell near Reading, and they do most of their work for the Formula One industry, kind of machining parts for race cars. But they decided to take it on, and they're going to build us some sprockets. And it's just that kind of thing. It's that kind of slight, steam train enthusiast element to it as well. Just enjoying pulling stuff apart and putting it back together again. That if you've got that kind of mentality and that kind of interest in things, that will help you as well. Yeah,
if you're not afraid of doing that, that's very handy. It's also, as long as you're aware of the consequences of doing that too, that's also very important, I think. Yes. So, but
as long as you've got enough time to rebuild anything before the start of a show. Yeah.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. And the curiosity there, that's a huge difference. So yeah.
Definitely.
So here's a completely random question that I always like to put people on the spot with. So, James, favorite movie, favorite film?
Favorite film.
Well, give us one of your top three.
Well, I guess I used to write for a horror magazine in Canada for a little while, and so I would say one of my favorite sort of comfort movies is John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, which came 5, I want to say. I just find that hilarious and horrific and fun at the same time, and it looks great too. Just from a technical point of view, it looks and sounds fantastic. So that's my vote.
It's a good choice, definitely.
Good choice. And you, Dom?
I was having a bit of a think about this as well, and I guess because I work for the BFI, in theory I should be into kind of art house, so I should probably say something like "Oh, Hazard Balthazar" by Bresson, or something by Jean-Luc Godard or something. And but I'm actually, my tastes are a bit trashy, really. I think one of my favorite films is probably David Lynch's Dune. I've just got a real soft spot for that 1984 version of it. I love the Villeneuve ones; they were great, impressive. But there's just something about David Lynch's Dune. and I like, I don't know, Predator and Aliens, and I don't know. I've got fairly trashy taste. I've got to be honest. I just don't tell my program colleagues about them too much.
At least you're honest. At least you're honest, Dom. So.
That's it.
Exactly.
So we've had a question in. I'll start with you, Dom. How do you think technical roles will evolve over the next 5 to 10 years?
I mean, I think there still will be. I mean, a lot of multiplexes have moved to automation, so there's kind of from that side of things. If you want to work for one of the majors, one of the bigger companies, then there's only really kind of engineering roles in that respect. But for independents, for people like myself and for James, there's still scope for kind of people in the box, you know, operating on shows, screening films, running Q&As, that side of things. So that kind of live event side of things will continue. But I think it would be good to investigate kind of the engineering side of things, because talking to people in the industry in London and in the UK, I feel like there's kind of a lack of people coming through in the engineering side of the industry at the moment. I think that's probably a useful area to look into. So this is, and again, this can be tricky to find kind of training courses to work on that sort of area. So a lot of times it helps to move from a technical role in a cinema, but there is, at the moment, it feels like there's a shortfall in engineering roles in the UK. And I think a lot of cinemas aren't using engineers as much as they should do. So that's possibly an option.
Yeah,
The easiest route into that, I'm not entirely sure. So and that's not particularly helpful for anyone. But
just to echo that, I think the engineering side is another pretty critical path, because when or locally in Toronto, when you find out the number of technicians that are available to actually service the cinemas and sort of do that sort of very technically specific roles, particularly with integrations and this, you know, doing system designs and builds, like there's not a lot out there, and I find like that becomes a very sort of specific role, and probably sought out role when you're doing a system design. And I think now too, there's a lot of venues that look, if they want to do a cinema, so at least I've seen this in Canada, it's a cinema that wants to do sort of a lot of additional elements around it, right? Like we'd screen films, but we want to do a lot of live, more complex events. So it's like someone who can kind of wrap their head around the systems engineering for a lot of those other elements, but still sort of adhere to the cinema standards. And I think that becomes a bit of a challenging role as well.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of leads on to another question just come in. I mean, I guess sticking with you, James, I mean, what do you see are the key trends in sort of the current key trends in cinema or performance? And how could that translate into working practices? Bit of an open question.
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of the has been what we call DSP, digital sound processing, and sort of collapsing a lot of what would have been standalone elements of like audio processing on cinema is done with this. Your audio for your live event is done with that. And now, because everything sort of entered into this sort of digital sound processing ecosystem for, and there's different flavors and different systems out there, a lot of that has sort of collapsed. So for sort of like our installation at the Lightbox, we did a fairly major upgrade recently where a lot of the cinema audio, and that includes like 35, 16, 70, and the digital cinema audio, and our live performance audio has all been collapsed in sort of one ecosystem, which has provided a lot of benefits, but there's a lot of different considerations of how those things go together because they become sort of part of one family. So I would say that's the sort of the angle, the biggest change that I've seen in the last little while. I think for image and projection, I don't see a lot on sort of the system side, but like for audio, it's been quite a huge change and also a good one. It's afforded a lot of flexibility with what you can do now. So, yeah. So having a good understanding of, again, like network infrastructure, or even I think sound engineering is also kind of a huge thing. So you can just sort of visualize signal path and get an understanding of how different things tie into what and what role they have within sort of a signal chain. I think that becomes a huge benefit.
Yeah. And like we were saying before, it's sound engineering courses are easy to find. So in a way, that's a way in. That's a way into kind of getting a role at an integrator or a sort of a service technician post potentially, because there's a lot of in-house training that takes place in the cinema industry. I mean, we always train people in-house. I think any time an engineering company takes on someone new, they'll also train them in-house as well, because there aren't really these formal routes. So kind of, light calibration and color calibration from projectors, that side of things as well, can be done in-house. So if you've got kind of the building blocks of a certain element of being an engineer, so one building block would be kind of audio knowledge, then that's just
sure I understand.
got Siri talking to me. That's a way in a way, and then once you've got your foot in the door, then there's definitely scope for in-house training, and I think that happens a lot in the cinema industry as well. I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So audio engineering is a good one, James. I think that's probably a good option for getting your foot in the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I agree with what you're saying. Trying to get the next generation of engineers into the sort of the next young people to get into this industry. I agree with you. It can be quite challenging. So yeah, very interesting.
I think one challenging thing just with cinema in specific, though, I mean, I guess live events kind of pair with this a bit, is that, certain events you would have distinct roles. Technician, right? Audio engineer, lighting technician, projection, video, that kind of thing. And when you get to the cinema side, the engineer that's responsible for that really does collapse a number of those together in one person, right? So, hitting it from certain angles, whether it be audio engineering or, even video. I know some people have started from video editing and getting an understanding of sort of pixel dimensions and how video processing works. That was another angle in it. And then they learn the audio side, so I think, getting sort of starting with a certain technical base, but understanding that cinema requires sort of these other elements, or having a good understanding of these other elements becomes sort of a good path, I guess, to get in. So.
Yeah, I think we touched on this before when we spoke about this earlier, Phil. You've got kind of, in London at least, there are a lot of corporate event companies who will do the video side of things, will do the audio side of things, the lighting side of things, the rigging side of things as well. So if you can get experience in that way, that's a way in as well. What I would probably say is that generally those kind of corporate events productions probably pay a little better in the cinema industry. So I mean, we're not known for incredibly high wages, definitely not for cinema technicians, but I think you're likely to get more stability if you're working in the cinema technical field, as opposed to kind of working as a freelance in corporate event production, that side of things. But that's another way in, I think.
Yeah, agree.
Interesting. So here's a personal question. I'll stick with you, Dom. So what's your favorite film format and why? So i.e. digital, 35mm, 70mm. What's your personal favorite and why?
Oh, Super 8. No, I don't know. I do really enjoy working with 70mm. Actually, we don't screen as much 70mm as I'd like. I mean, generally because there aren't really that many prints available. But running 70mm prints it's always good fun. You get that kind of superior contrast and focused, and generally they're big films. They always do well. They always sell well. So that's the other thing I enjoy. But we have just wrapped on the Royal Festival Hall. So installing a kind of a cinema from scratch in the Royal Festival Hall, which is a 2,000 plus seater concert hall in London, and bringing in our own 18-meter wide matte white screen, bringing in Christie projectors, and installing a sound system, and just doing kind of gala screenings at the LFF. I think that's probably the most exciting and most entertaining part of my role personally. I do genuinely love that kind of, like the big events, basically. You have people on stage, filmmakers, brand new films, premieres. It's just it's a good laugh. It's exciting, and So I guess you probably do similar stuff at TIFF as well. It's not about celebrities, but it's about putting on a big show for a lot of people.
Big show.
It's a big show, and I think for me it's the because I mostly meet the directors. I don't meet the big stars and that kind of thing, but getting that sort of satisfaction from the directors of like, that's exactly the way I wanted to see it. That means the world, because then it's like everybody got hopefully the best experience they could possibly get. with this
That's
film,
it.
and hopefully it was a good film.
Yeah,
So,
it's never a guarantee. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
A couple of years ago, Dom, at the London Film Festival, when The Irishman was premiered there, and all of a sudden Martin Scorsese, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino all came out on stage, and I was there with my oldest son, and we were both absolutely blown away just seeing these legends standing sort of up on the stage in front of the big screen was really memorable.
Yeah, that's a buzz. It's definitely a buzz.
Yeah. I've got time for one more that's come in. What is the best way to save / export old video and old film? I'm saying high 8, super 8, question mark.
I mean, it's actually getting easier to do that. You know, people like Blackmagic make a lot of capture cards. You can, if you build your own PC, you can get internal capture cards, or you can get external capture cards. Yeah, actually, you know, people like DaVinci, DaVinci Resolve, you can do your own grading and touch up now, and all of that sort of thing is becoming a lot cheaper to do. So yeah, capture cards, video capture cards.
Capture cards. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming to the top of the hour, gents. So I'm going to let you get back to the Lake District and Egypt, James. But I'd like to say thank you so much, gentlemen, for participating. We really appreciate you taking the time out, and hoping that our audience have got something from this. I'm sure they have.